Courageous Recovery broadcast. I'm your host, Randy Mortensen. This is a weekly 20 to 30 minute program where we provide answers for your I don't know how. Whether you're dealing with recovery issues, emotions from a loss, or maybe life has just thrown you one more curveball than you were expecting, I'm so glad you're here and listening. And today it's just my privilege and pleasure to have as my guest Mia Hayes, and she has just a powerful, powerful story. And you're just going to love the passion that comes from her voice as just a very, very talented author. And it's always great to know that we have people joining this broadcast from coast to coast. And at last count, we had listeners in 22 or 23 countries. Thank you for taking time from your busy schedules to connect. You should see a chat box if you're on one of those platforms that allows for chat. Please just go ahead and put your comments or any questions in there on our Facebook group. That's where we get the most of our Courageous Recovery questions and inputs. If there's a subscribe button, please hit subscribe. For more information, you can go to my personal website, which is randymortensen.com. That's Randy, last name Mortensen, Mortensen. Later in the show, I will talk more about the 21-point assessment. That's a tool to determine whether you or a loved one qualifies for one of my programs that is called the Lifestyle Champion Cohort. Mia, it's great to have you on the show, and I just want to say welcome to
Hi,
you.
how are you?
And it's just a busy time. I hear people talking about how they're so bored and they just don't have much going on, but that's just not the case in my world. And based on just getting to know you a little bit, that's not the case in your world either, right?
No, not at all. It's been very busy.
It's I don't know how people say, oh, it's so boring during this pandemic. It's like, really?
Yeah, there's been a lot to do. I mean, new hobbies, new activities, just trying to keep everybody moving in the right direction.
Right,
It's a
right.
different way of life.
And with three, let me see, I have it here, with a husband and three sons and two cats and a cute little dog. You got a lot of stuff going on in Northern
I have
Virginia, right?
I have a circus going on over here.
A
Yes,
circus going on.
we
That's
do. We have a
well
circus.
said. Well said. So anybody that's listened to the show before knows my usual first question is, what is there that you know today that you wish your 22-year-old self would have known?
Well, that is a great question. I actually got married when I was 22. And so a lot of my story is actually about my relationship with my husband and my family. So I think what I would have told myself at 22 is it's good to be pie-eyed and starry-eyed and think all the best is going to come. You don't need to be a fatalist or a realist or anything like that, but you do need to learn how to deal with adversity. And especially if you're a married person like I was at 22, you need to build a good foundation for your family, not just for your marriage, but for your family. And if you don't have that good foundation, 10, 15, 20 years later, when something bad comes along to knock you sideways, you're going to crumble. If you have a foundation, you're going to be able to rebuild.
Wow.
So that's what I would tell
Wow.
myself. Focus on building that foundation.
Focus on building the foundation. Those are words of wisdom indeed.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, for sure. So share with the audience just your passion for writing and take us down that path a bit, if you would, please.
Yeah. So I'm an author and I write primarily women's fiction novels. I started writing those novels about 4 or 5 years ago after working in the publishing industry since 2010. I've had novels published in, let's see, Hungary, Germany, Spanish language, and also in the United States, Canada, and English speaking countries. I recently published a memoir called Always Yours Be, which is about really, well, when I started writing it, I thought it was about my relationship with my husband and our marriage and how we survived a lot of really horrible things. But I found out after I wrote it that people are actually responding to it, not just in that way, but also as a journey of my mental health. And I've become much more passionate over the past 2 years about talking about my mental health and being very open about my personal struggles. So writing, mental health, and family are like my three big things.
And you mentioned earlier that you've primarily looked at two different audiences,
Yes.
right? And
hmm
so share a little bit about that, please.
So I started writing young adult novels, for ages 12 to about 18. And then I switched to writing adult fiction. And um, I don't, I think actually young adult novels might be a little bit more difficult to write than adult. People feel that children's books are dumbed down a little bit. Um, but I actually think that's when your brain is the most malleable. And so what you're writing about for these children, I think, is maybe more impressionable than what you write for as an adult. Adults, I think, are looking for someone more to relate to and have shared experiences with. And kids are looking more aspiration, maybe. I don't like to say that like I try to create role models in my books for younger audiences, but I do think that kids are trying to figure out who they are,
Yeah.
whereas adults maybe have a sense of who they are, but maybe they've lost their way a little bit. So they're looking for someone who's shared an experience with them.
Yeah. And I would think that younger audience would be very, very difficult to focus on. I don't even know what I would say, quite honestly, to
Yeah,
to
and
that younger audience.
yeah, and it's hard because I have three young boys, and so I think about um, the things that they go through. And I wrote fantasy novels and contemporary novels, and then I did some ghost writings for some big five publishing houses. So I was kind of all over the place with what I wrote. But the one thing that remains the same through adult novels and through children's novels is that everybody wants a kernel of truth and a seed of hope. So if you can give them those things in a book, I think you have a pretty successful story.
Excellent. Excellent. And your book, Always Yours B, was selected by BookBub as one of the 15 powerful memoirs to read in 2021.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Was that anywhere on your whiteboard as far as, okay, this is what I want to accomplish when you wrote it?
No, I was completely flabbergasted. I actually found out 2 days before the book published, and the list of the other people that were on the book, it's crazy. And then there's me. I mean, it was all very well-known people and me. So, like
Well
Ricky Lee,
done.
yeah, Ricky Lee Jones, Juliana Margulies, Isabel Allende. So, I mean, like very well-established celebrities, famous people, and also authors, and me. And so I was in shock.
Well done.
Thank
That
you.
kudos. We'll share with the audience here in a few minutes how they can get their hands on that book for sure, and any of your other writings. So there was something that happened how many years ago that was the life-changing event for your marriage? How many years ago was that?
It's a little over 10 years. So it was 2000, it was November 2010.
Okay, so share with the listeners what happened and the journey, if you would, please.
Okay. So very briefly, my husband was riding his scooter to his office in San Francisco, and it was a very rainy day. That particular day, normally I would have driven him, but I was waiting for a phone call with an editor, and he decided to drive his scooter to work in the rain. He was hit at an intersection by a truck making an illegal left-hand turn from a center lane. And for several hours, a man called me and said that my husband had been hit by a car, and he couldn't give me any information about where he had been taken or anything like that. So for several hours, my mother-in-law, who lived next door to me, she and I called every hospital in San Francisco looking for my husband, and we couldn't find him. So finally, I called an ambulance company. They told me that he would have been checked in under an alias at San Francisco General. So I just started driving over there. And as I was driving, I got a call from the hospital saying that he'd been admitted. They could not give me his status over the phone. I needed to come talk to the doctor. So I just assumed he was dead. So turns out he was not dead. They released him that day with extensive injuries, but they never did a brain scan. They just
Hmm.
said that he may have a mild concussion, but we should be thankful and grateful because he was wearing all his protective gear and he wasn't injured anymore than what he was. That was 2 days before Thanksgiving, and he was on a lot of painkillers over Thanksgiving. we had a trip to Europe planned on Saturday, and it was a work trip. He was going to film a lot of people in his company, and I was gonna tag along with him. It was gonna be our first big trip without our kids ever. And so I was very like excited about it. And he announced over Thanksgiving dinner that we were still going to be doing this trip. And he had two broken wrists, dislocated shoulders, like I think 60 stitches from hip to hip on his backside, and could barely walk. And he was insistent that we were going to do this trip. And we did. We went for 10 days with the videographer, and we traveled around Europe, and it was um, not the best idea. I mean, just in hindsight, it was not a good idea. I should have pushed back more. And I get into that in the book. But anyway, the fallout from all of that was that he went into denial over the extent of his injuries, because basically the hospital said that there was nothing wrong with him mentally. We started getting lots of medical bills, and we realized initially we didn't want to pursue any action against the driver. He was 19 years old. We didn't want to ruin the kid's life, but our medical bills were spiraling out of control at that point. Um, so we did end up suing the insurance company, his and his work, because he was on the job at the time.
Sure.
And my husband had to go through a lot of tests, like mental tests and physical tests that were completely draining. And he did that for about 18 months. Um, so during that time, he was diagnosed with traumatic brain injury.
I was going
Uh,
to say, so at what point into that 18 months did they finally, so you went to Europe
yes,
without the awareness that he had suffered a traumatic brain injury, it sounds like.
yes. So it was probably about 6 months after his accident that he was diagnosed with PTSD, depression, and a traumatic brain injury. And
Six
so
months.
6 months.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And
And so
not in a
I
good way.
no, and like we had noticed like his short-term memory was not working properly. He had a hard time um, recalling things from the past. And actually, he confessed to me one night that he didn't really remember. He knew who I was and he knew who our kids were, but he didn't remember how we had gotten to this place. He didn't remember marrying me. He didn't remember my kids being born. Um, and that was like the first aha moment that there was something wrong here. So anyway, fast forward a year, 1 year anniversary of his accident, he started having an affair with a woman that he met through his work connections. Um, and that lasted for 9 months until I found out about it. And during that time, he became more um, emotionally and mentally abusive toward me. He was drinking heavily, and I didn't know because he traveled so much for work. So he was drinking constantly when he was traveling. Um, and when I found out, I had had enough. I had been pushed to my limit. I had been trying to protect my children and my family and him from himself. And so I left. I found out at 5 a.m. and by 11 p.m. that night, I was on a plane to Paris. And I told him that he needed to come to me and fix our relationship if that's what he wanted. But I was done trying to fix him.
And you said before, and I don't recall. So your children at that time stayed. Did you take them with you or not?
No, so my in-laws lived next door to me,
Okay.
but we actually sent the kids to my parents' house in
In
Michigan.
Michigan. That's right. You said that earlier. I forgot.
Yeah, so
Okay.
my so
Okay.
my mother-in-law stayed with my children until they went to Michigan.
Wow. And so speak to that emotion, because there's no doubt a spouse that has just learned recently of
Mhm.
some infidelity and his or her part. What how do you deal with that as the spouse?
It's very hard. In my case, my husband was immediately remorseful. I was very angry, and I felt foolish because I'd been making excuses, and everything that he'd been treating me, every way he'd been treating me, I had blamed on his brain injury or his PTSD. Like I had a reason why he was behaving the way that he was. Um, but that morning, I made him go downstairs and tell his parents what he had done, and then he unwisely, after I told him I didn't want to see him for the rest of the day, he had a therapy appointment. I told him to go to therapy or go to work, but I didn't want to see him. Um, he did a Facebook post where he confessed everything to everyone and apologized for how horrible he was. And it was mortifying. I didn't know. My friend called me and said she'd just seen the post and did I need her to come over? And that's when I was like, I can't walk into the schoolyard. I am so embarrassed. People had always come to me for marriage advice, because our marriage was so good. Like, we had just such a wonderful marriage before this accident. And I was embarrassed. I was angry. I was looking for revenge. Like, whoever I could swing out and hit, I wanted to hit. Um, it took a long time to work through a lot of those emotions.
And then I believe you'd mentioned that he was not only sneaking the drinking, but
Yeah.
also he was prescribed a large number of pain pills that were contributing to some of the challenges also, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And so, I mean, he would take the pain pills, then he wouldn't take the pain pills, but the drinking was like absolutely consistent. Um,
Okay.
and we
Okay.
never kept alcohol in our home. And so he would there we lived in San Francisco. There were two bars on the corner of my street. So, and I started to notice, like, he'd come home sometimes and he would smell like whiskey, or he would smell like beer. And his explanation was, oh, it was a work event. Oh, it was this, or it was that. And I just kind of was in denial. I didn't
Sure.
want to see what was actually happening.
Sure, sure. And and so then I think you even talked about some of your personal challenges then also, right? So speak
Yeah.
about those behavior issues or the mental challenges that you dealt with in them personally.
Right. So when I left for Paris, I was in a not great state of mind after having gone through essentially 18 months of, dealing with the aftermath of my husband's accident and then finding out about his affair. I was on very shaky mental ground. The day that I left, I actually called my general practitioner and I told her what happened, and I said, I'm going to Paris tonight. And so she prescribed me lorazepam to help calm and just relax me, because I was just in such a state. Um, so I went to Paris with, I've never taken anything like this before in my life. I've never taken Xanax. I didn't even take, I had my wisdom teeth out. I didn't even take the narcotics for my wisdom teeth. So here I am. I have like this full prescription of lorazepam, and I get to Paris. And again, I'm not a drinker. I have just spent 10 years basically having children, nursing, and chasing after children. So I don't drink, but I show up in Paris and I'm like, champagne sounds fantastic. Pills sound fantastic. And so I just really numbed myself for a couple of days in the beginning there, until my husband showed up. And then it was just chaos, I think, because we were both drinking. I was taking pills and he wasn't. Um, and it got to a point where I basically wanted to overdose because I was in so much pain. Um, and there's a lot of anger. And he was doing everything that he could to try to rectify things with me. And I couldn't understand how he could love me the way he said he did and do these things at the same time. Like, it just didn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Sure.
Um, but when we were in Paris, he found a therapist for me, and I started seeing her. And he also saw a therapist, and he started doing, I'm going to mess up the initials, but I think it's eye rapid desensitization movement, I think is what it's called.
Okay.
Special type of therapy for people that have PTSD.
Okay.
And so he started doing that, and his personality started coming back. Um, the anger lessened, the drinking calmed it down. He just started to be like his old self. But as he was recovering during that period, I was just spinning completely out of control. So my children weren't there, and so it was just the two of us, and I was just a mess. Eventually, my children did come to France, and we were there for a couple of months with them. And then we moved to Northern Virginia. And in Northern Virginia, I just completely fell apart. I isolated myself from all my friends and family. I stopped taking phone calls. We knew nobody here. And I was eventually diagnosed with bipolar 2 disorder, depression, and actually PTSD also. So,
Okay. Okay.
um,
Yeah, and that makes sense because of all the verbal abuse and
yeah,
all of the heartbreak that you went through. That's not a surprise based on a
yeah.
little bit that I know of other people's journeys for
But it
sure.
made me feel very weak, because I, in my brain, had always been a very type A person, a person like the whole time my husband was going through his issues, I'll be the rock. I made this promise, for better, for worse, sickness and health. I will pull everybody through this. And when I stepped back and realized I couldn't pull anybody through anything because I couldn't even pull myself through it,
Right. Right.
um,
Yeah.
it was
Yeah.
hard. It was hard to accept that.
Yeah. Well, let me just talk about a couple of things here, and then I want to give you the opportunity to let people know how to get a hold of you and how to buy your books and so on. So my lifestyle champion cohort will be starting another 8-week program starting next month, where we use Zoom technology for the 90-minute weekly meetings, where the first 30 minutes is teaching, and then we move into the accountability and the community aspect of it. There's 3 phases to this 8-week program. First is evaluate, second is equip, third is enjoy. If you're interested in more information, go ahead and just send me a text message, text champion to 66866. That's champion to 66866. And to know if you qualify, you can go to my website, which is randymortensen.com, Randy, Mortensen. And on the front page there, you'll see a 21-point assessment that will determine whether you're a mild, moderate, or severe case of substance use disorder. If you're a mild or moderate, you qualify for the champion cohort, the lifestyle champion cohort. If you're severe, then I'll be more than happy to refer you to people within my network, literally from coast to coast, that are a good solution for anybody that's ready to seek help today. And Mia, how do people get in touch with you, and where's the best place for them to buy your new book as well as any of the other printings that you have?
So the best place to reach me is probably on Instagram. I am Mia Hayes Author on Instagram. I also have a Facebook page, which is Mia Hayes Author, and my website, miahayesauthor.com. And then also I have my email, which is mia@miahayesauthor.com. And then
miahayesauthor.com. Okay.
mia@miahayesauthor.com.
Mia,
Yeah.
Mia author. Oh, it's
Mia,
okay.
Mia
Mia
at
at
Mia Hayes.
miahayesauthor.com.
I know
Okay.
it's a mouthful, isn't it?
That is a mouthful.
And then my books are available anywhere that you can buy books, paperback, audiobooks, and ebooks. So they're
Okay.
on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Kobo, Apple, and Audible. So anywhere that you want to buy a book, you can basically find my books.
And is there any advantage to them going directly to your website, or it doesn't matter?
My website is just kind of a place to find
Okay.
out where all my books are. I'm
Okay.
not very good at keeping it up, but it does have links. It does have links to all the buy links are there.
Okay.
And
Okay. All
sample
right.
and the audiobook samples are on there also.
Okay. All right. And I guess, and we'll put those into the show notes, that information as we're publishing this episode. I guess the real question is coming to my mind, and no doubt there's a listener or two that's wondering the same. What would you say to that wife whose husband maybe hasn't been in an accident, but the husband's behavior is just changing, the lies, the deceit, and the verbal abuse, and maybe they learn of the infidelity of that spouse? What would you say to that wife? How would you encourage her to not give up?
Yeah, I think when people are facing hardship, a lot of other people will say to them to walk away. It's not worth it. Don't try. Like, oh, he cheated on you, kick him to the curb, or oh, he has a drinking problem, kick him to the curb. I think there are a lot of women and wives, husbands, partners out there who are invested in that relationship. So the first thing that I would say is make sure that you're taking care of yourself, right? Make sure that you're in a good place mentally, make sure you're in a good place physically, but make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And then the second thing I would say is marriage is a partnership. So both people have to be on board with fixing it. If you're just pulling all the weight all the time, it's not going to work. If there's sometimes you're picking up the load and they're picking up the load and they're willing to do the work with you, then there's something there, and you can't just turn your back when there's something there. I think as much as it hurts, sometimes you just have to keep going to get through it, because I can tell you now, I found out about my husband's infidelity in 2012. So we're almost, what, 9 years out, I think. Um, my marriage is better than it ever was. And we had a great marriage before, and it is so much better now. And it was not it was not easy and it was hard, but we are in a great place. So it can happen if you're willing to both do the work.
Those are great words. And I will just say that you're in the minority, right?
Yeah,
As far as sticking to it and being committed to one another, and at the same time, if it was only you, it wouldn't be where you are today. It took a
right.
partnership and true love
Yeah.
to really fight through it. It sounds like, kudos to you.
Oh, thank you.
That's a great, what I say often is, it's a great testimony to your children. Um,
It's funny because my boys actually say one of the greatest gifts we've given them is watching us fix our marriage.
that is powerful.
Yeah, it actually is. Like my oldest son is 20 years old and he says that all the time. Like he has watching us rebuild our marriage has been one of the best things for him.
Well, and if I do the quick math, I mean, he wasn't even a teenager yet when this started.
Yeah,
And
just
so to
10.
watch mom and dad now go through this, that's a
Mhm.
powerful life lesson, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And my boys are just wonderful kids in general, but they've weathered this adversity like with such grace and forgiveness. Like they forgave my husband for what he did. They forgave me for some of the behaviors that I engaged in, and we've all grown as a family because of it. And I think, like too often we say that I think people think of for when you say you forgive someone, they think that you're absolving that person of whatever it is that they've done. But really, forgiveness is for you.
Right.
The powerful thing that allows you to move forward.
Right. And who's the most difficult person to forgive?
Yourself,
Yourself. It's exactly
100%.
right. And
Hmm.
and if I'm not able to forgive myself, how can I expect others to?
Right. And then there's,
Or yeah. Or how can I offer forgiveness to others if I'm not willing to forgive myself?
right.
Um,
And I get into that a lot in my book because like I had a hard time forgiving myself because I blamed myself for my husband's accident. And then I had a lot of shame around his affair. I felt that I had done something wrong or that I had pushed him into it. And just learning to forgive myself and grant myself grace was
yeah.
what helped me get better.
Yeah. Yeah. And as has been said in many of the recovery rooms, the AA rooms that I've been in around, across the country, what are the biggest causes of relapse? Guilt, shame, resentments,
Hmm.
that, or why do we go deeper into our addictive behaviors? Guilt, shame,
Yeah.
resentments. And it sounds, on the other side of it, it sounds like, okay, well, if I can do it, you can do it. At the same time, in that moment, it's hell.
It's a boulder up a mountain.
Yeah, well
it's
said. Well
it's
said.
hard. It's
Yeah.
hard. And
Yeah.
I remember my therapist told me that it was probably going to take about 5 years for us to right the ship. And I remember looking at her and saying, I don't have 5 years. Like I need it fixed now.
Sure.
And but nothing good happens now. You know.
No.
So
No. And as you just said, the boys watching you is such a powerful witness.
hmm
They will be better men because of
I
you.
I hope so. My When I found out about everything that was going on with my husband, his best friend is a pastor, and I called him, and he had seen the Facebook post, and so we were talking, and he said that it was going to take a lot of grace and forgiveness on my part, and I was like, I don't have grace. I am so mad. Like, and I definitely don't have forgiveness in my heart. And it took me a long time to realize what forgiveness actually meant.
Yeah. 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 And if what I will hear myself say is if God can forgive you, why can't I
Yeah.
also? Right. That is how I would challenge guys and gals is if God's willing to forgive him, or if God's willing to forgive her, why aren't you? You
Right.
know? And
No,
and yeah, totally. But it's, as we've all said, it's how dare you? Or it's how could I? Or how
mhm.
could he? Or whatever. It's the comparison analysis and paralysis that really holds us back in our recovery worlds too,
Yeah, and I
for
also
sure.
think, there's a sense of losing oneself too. When you don't know who you are as a person, it's easy to spiral out of control. And when
Yeah.
you have relationship issues, it's really easy to not know who you are anymore. And when your spouse is falling apart, and who you thought you were is being challenged, and you no longer see that person staring back at you in the mirror, it's chaotic. And
Yeah.
just kind of figuring out where all the pieces go again, it's hard. It's very
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. So, okay. So it's hard to believe that our time is closing in, but let me just say a couple of things, and then I'd like you to offer some closing words of encouragement. Okay.
Okay.
So, ladies and gentlemen, the overdose rate, even prior to the pandemic, had tripled since 1990. Right now in the United States, we're seeing more than 130 overdose deaths per day. Shockingly, it's costing the American economy more than $800 billion annually. So if you know someone who's struggling today, maybe you're that person who's battling compulsive and destructive behavior, please don't wait another day to seek help. You can reach out to me at 321-757-HOPE, which is my office number. Again, that's 321-757-HOPE, or call someone you know and trust. Those who are dying are husbands, wives, sons, and daughters of someone who loves them. Today's the day. Please don't wait another day. If you're interested in a free download of an ebook of mine that's titled "The 5 Common Mistakes Made When Pursuing Recovery," go ahead and text champion to 66866. And I want Mia to share again the best way for you to buy her new memoir titled "Always Yours B," which was selected by BookBub as one of the 15 most powerful memoirs to read in 2021. So just kudos on that. Each time I
Thank
read that,
you.
I say, that is so cool. And folks, I really do hope you found this information helpful today. You can look for the replay to be available on Buzzsprout, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and others. And Mia, as we wrap up, what words of encouragement would you offer that guy or gal that's heard this today and say, yeah, well, she can do it, but I don't know that I can ever make that happen. What would you say to them?
I think sometimes the only way to go through pain is to really go through the pain and allow yourself to feel it, experience it, and confront it head on. It's scary, but sometimes there's really no other way if you want to come out the other side.
Okay. Okay. Face the pain, go through it
Yeah.
for sure.
Mhm.
Okay. Well, folks, this has just been a huge blessing to have Mia on with me today. Have a blessed day and be extraordinary today.